I wasn't snooping. I swear, I wasn't. The diary was just there, shoved behind his sweaters on the top shelf, like it had been forgotten, or hidden. And I should have left it alone. I should have. But the second I saw my name, I couldn't stop reading, and that's when I found it. She makes me feel alive. And he wasn't talking about me. This is a story of love, betrayal, and the moment you realize the person you trust most might be someone you don't really know at all. Before we get into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I used to think love was about choosing someone and holding on. Even when the excitement faded. Even when life got predictable. Because that's what real love was, right? A choice. A commitment. That's what Daniel and I had, commitment. 10 years together, 7 years married. We had a good life. A house in a quiet neighborhood, matching coffee mugs, a couch with a slight dip in the middle from all the nights we spent curled up watching reruns of shows we both pretended to still find funny. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Lately though, something felt different. Or maybe he felt different. I tried to ignore it at first. Daniel was busy at work, that was all. Big projects, deadlines. He came home later than usual, his face lined with exhaustion. When I asked if he was okay, he'd give me a small tired smile and say, "Just a long day." And I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? But the small things started piling up. The way he'd check his phone and turn the screen away. The way he seemed there but not really there when we talked over dinner. How he'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, but it felt routine. Like muscle memory instead of something real. I told myself I was overthinking. That marriages go through phases. That maybe I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. Then one night, I woke up alone. The sheets beside me were cool, untouched. I glanced at the clock, 2:13 a.m. Daniel never stayed up this late. I sat up, listening. The house was silent, but a faint glow crept up the stairs from the living room. I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway, careful not to make any noise. As I reached the bottom step, I saw him. Daniel was sitting on the couch in the dark, his face lit only by the pale blue of his phone screen. He wasn't scrolling, wasn't typing. Just staring. Daniel. He jumped, shoving his phone into his pocket so fast it was almost clumsy. His head snapped up, eyes wide, caught in a moment I wasn't supposed to see. "Maggie." He let out a shaky breath, running a hand over his face. "Couldn't sleep." Something about the way he said it, too quick, too normal, made my stomach twist. "You okay?" I asked. He forced a smile. "Yeah. Just work stuff." I could have pushed. I could have asked why his heart was beating so fast, why he looked like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. But I didn't. Instead, I let him come to bed, let him pull me close like nothing had changed. But something had. And I was starting to think I was the only one who hadn't noticed. You ever have that feeling in your gut that tells you something is wrong, but you push it aside because you don't want it to be true? That's what I did. After that night, I told myself I was imagining things. That Daniel was just stressed, that I was reading too much into his late nights and his guarded phone. But once you start noticing something, you can't unnotice it. And no matter how hard I tried, the doubt was there, sitting heavy in my chest. Then, more little things started adding up. Daniel started waking up earlier than usual. For as long as I'd known him, he was the type who hit snooze 3 times before rolling out of bed. But suddenly, he was up before the alarm, slipping into workout clothes and heading to the gym. At first, I teased him about it. "Since when do you care about fitness?" I joked one morning as I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee while he tied his sneakers. He smirked but didn't look at me. "Trying something new. Helps clear my head." I wanted to believe him. But the man I married had never once set foot in a gym unless it was to pick up takeout from the smoothie bar. And then there was the cologne. One evening, I walked into the bathroom while he was getting ready for work and caught a whiff of something unfamiliar. It was subtle, woodsy, expensive. "You wearing new cologne?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel glanced at me in the mirror and shrugged. "Yeah. Just felt like switching it up." He never wore cologne. Not even on special occasions. I kept telling myself these were normal things. People change, right? But when I reached for him at night, when I tried to pull him close, he'd stiffen, mutter something about being tired, and roll over. And then came the dress shirt. I was folding laundry one afternoon when I noticed it, one of his crisp white work shirts, freshly washed, smelling like something that wasn't mine. It wasn't overpowering, but it was there. A faint, floral perfume. I held the fabric up to my face and inhaled, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. It wasn't mine. It wasn't mine. For a long moment, I stood there, clutching the shirt in my hands, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe it was from a coworker. Maybe someone hugged him. Maybe I was losing my damn mind. I tossed the shirt into the laundry basket and told myself to stop being ridiculous. But later that night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I studied him. The way he ate, the way he smiled, the way he talked. Searching for something, anything, that would make me feel like I was wrong. But all I saw was a stranger wearing my husband's face. I don't know what made me do it that day. Daniel was out of town for the weekend, off at some work retreat in the mountains. I had the house to myself, and I could have done anything, watched a movie, read a book, slept in. But instead, I found myself cleaning out our bedroom closet. Maybe I just needed to keep busy. Maybe I was looking for a distraction. Or maybe, deep down, I was searching for something, even if I didn't know it yet. I was pulling down a stack of sweaters from the top shelf when something tumbled out, landing at my feet with a quiet thud. A small, leather-bound notebook. I frowned, bending down to pick it up. The cover was worn, the edges slightly frayed. Daniel didn't keep a journal. At least, I didn't think he did. I hesitated for only a second before flipping it open. At first, it was nothing. Pages filled with messy sketches, notes about work, numbers and dates I didn't understand. Just an architect's scribbles. But then somewhere in the middle, I saw my name. My breath caught in my throat. Maggie is good. She is kind. She is safe. Safe. I didn't know why, but that word hit me like a punch to the gut. I kept reading, my fingers gripping the edges of the pages so tightly they trembled. And then I found it. She makes me feel alive. The word stared back at me, sharp and unforgiving. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, my heart hammering against my ribs. He wasn't talking about me. I flipped through the pages, searching for more, for anything that would explain what I was seeing. There were no names, no details, just fragmented thoughts, scattered between his work notes. But it didn't matter. I pressed my hand to my mouth, my stomach twisting violently. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me overthinking. There was someone else. I should have put the diary down. I should have walked away. But I couldn't. Because suddenly, I wasn't just holding a notebook. I was holding proof that my husband, the man I had built a life with, trusted, loved, was living a life I knew nothing about. And I didn't know what scared me more. The fact that he had written it. Or the fact that, deep down, I wasn't even surprised. I don't know how long I sat there, gripping that notebook like it might crumble in my hands. My mind, no, my whole body, felt like it had been unplugged, drained of every last bit of warmth. I should have confronted him the second he walked through the door. Held the diary up and demanded to know who she was. But I didn't. Because I needed more. If I asked him now, he'd lie. I knew he would. He'd say I was reading too much into it, that it was just words, just thoughts, just nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I needed proof. Real proof. So I waited. And I watched. The signs I couldn't ignore. The next week, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Daniel's whole demeanor shifted when he got a text. The way his eyes flickered, just for a second, before he turned his phone over, screen down on the table. And then there were the drives. Daniel had never been the type to go out just to clear his head. But now, at least twice a week, he'd grab his keys after dinner and mutter something about needing to take a drive. He thought I wasn't paying attention. But I was. And I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. Looking for the truth. It wasn't until the following Saturday that I let myself do something I never thought I'd do. Daniel had left to run errands, and I sat there, staring at the spot where his car had been, my pulse hammering. And then I moved. Straight to the garage. His car was always spotless. Daniel was obsessive about keeping it clean, but I wasn't looking for mess. I was looking for anything out of place. I checked the glove compartment first. Nothing but old receipts and insurance papers. The center console? Empty. I even lifted the floor mats, running my hands over every inch of the fabric. And then I saw it. A single receipt, tucked into the passenger side door. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. A coffee shop. 2 drinks. A blueberry muffin. The timestamp was from Wednesday afternoon. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. Daniel had been working late Wednesday. Or at least, that's what he told me. I gripped the receipt so tightly it crumpled in my hand. I needed more. The name that broke me. I spent the rest of the afternoon debating my next move. I wasn't the kind of person who went through their partner's things. I wasn't someone who snooped. But Daniel had already broken something between us. And I wasn't going to sit back and pretend not to see the cracks. So I grabbed our shared laptop, opened his email, and held my breath. His inbox was a mess, newsletters, work emails, a flood of unread junk. But then I saw it. A thread of messages. All to the same person. Sophie. The name alone sent a shiver down my spine. I hesitated, my heart beat thick in my throat. Then slowly, I clicked. The emails weren't long. They weren't even obvious. But they weren't nothing. Monday, thinking about that conversation we had. You always know what to say. Wednesday, thanks for today. I needed that. Friday, can't stop smiling. And then the attachment. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, my breath shallow. Click. A photo. Daniel and Sophie. They were sitting at a cafe, leaning in close, both of them laughing at something unseen. And Daniel, my husband, the man I'd spent a decade of my life with, was looking at her in a way he hadn't looked at me in a long time. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up. It wasn't just words in a diary anymore. It was real. There was someone else. And now I had to decide what to do with the truth staring me in the face. I don't remember closing the laptop. I don't remember standing up. I just remember the sound of my own breathing, shaky too fast, as I stared at the dark screen, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Sophie. A real person. Not a suspicion. Not a paranoia-induced fantasy I had cooked up in my head. She had a name. A face. A presence in my husband's life that I hadn't even known existed. I should have felt anger. Fury. Some kind of explosion rising inside me, ready to tear the whole house down. But all I felt was hollow. Because I had been right. And that meant something between us was already broken. The confrontation. I waited. Not because I was calm. Not because I wanted to play it smart. But because I didn't know how to start. I sat at the kitchen table, the diary in front of me, the word "she makes me feel alive" burning into my skull like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Daniel came home late. Again. The second he stepped through the door, I knew. Not just from the way he hesitated before setting his keys down, or how his eyes flicked to me like he could already sense something was wrong. But because I saw it now. The weight in his shoulders, the quiet disconnect in the way he moved through the house. Like he didn't fully belong here anymore. Like maybe he hadn't for a long time. I didn't wait for him to settle in. I didn't give myself time to second guess. Instead, I slid the diary across the table. Who is she? His whole body stiffened. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the clock ticking above the sink, each second stretching unbearably long. He looked at the notebook. Then at me. A slow exhale. Maggie. Don't. My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. I clenched them in my lap. Don't say my name like that. Just tell me the truth. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting toward the diary like it might burst into flames. Then finally he spoke. She's no one. A pause. A deep inhale. She was someone I knew a long time ago. Before you. I felt the words hit me, sharp and cold. Then why are you talking to her now? He swallowed. Looked away. And when he finally met my eyes again, I saw it, something I hadn't seen in months. Maybe even years. Regret. Guilt. Something raw and real. Because I don't know who I am anymore, he said quietly. And with her, I remember. The moment it all changed. The words knocked the breath out of me. It wasn't what I expected. I had been preparing for a confession of love. A broken promise. Some kind of declaration that would end us right there, split our lives into a before and after. But this was worse. This wasn't about Sophie. This was about him. About the man he used to be. The man he had lost somewhere between our mortgage payments and grocery lists and the quiet, steady routine of our marriage. And suddenly, I saw it. The late-night drives. The distant stares. The way he held his phone like it was a lifeline. It wasn't just about another woman. It was about escaping. And maybe I was part of what he was running from. My throat tightened. "Do you still love me?" His expression softened. "I do." He didn't hesitate. "But I don't know if that's enough." I let out a shaky breath, my hands pressing against the table to ground myself. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. I had been so afraid of losing him that I hadn't stopped to ask if I still wanted to hold on. The decision I never thought I'd make. We sat there for a long time, silence stretching between us, filled with too many things neither of us knew how to say. There was no screaming. No dramatic ultimatums. Just the quiet understanding that something between us had changed. That maybe, it had been changing for a long time. The next morning, I packed a bag. Not because I was leaving for good. But because I needed space. Because I couldn't be the only one fighting to keep this marriage from falling apart. Daniel didn't stop me. He just stood in the doorway, watching as I grabbed my coat, his face unreadable. "Where are you going?" His voice was quiet. "I don't know yet." I met his eyes. "But I know I can't stay. Not like this." A long pause. Then, he nodded. And just like that, I walked out the door. I didn't know what came next. But for the first time in a long time, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't settle for just being safe.